Welcome to my channel. Today we have a mixed media tutorial. I'm working on these 6x6 TCW folded cards with envelopes. But this project can be done on an art journal page, on a canvas, whatever substrate you want. So don't let what I'm working on deter you from using this any way that you want. Now I'm taping off an edge here with painter's tape, and I am taking the precaution of taking the painter's tape and sticking it on my jeans to make it a little less tacky so it doesn't lift up the paper. But you do run the risk of lifting up the paper when you pull it off. So you may want to skip this step. I'm trying hard to get an even border around. I just want to have that look on this. And then I'm taping this down on a piece of foam core. Again, this is something I'm doing to stabilize it. It's not really necessary in what I'm doing here. So now I want to colorize my card. Now this is made out of cardstock, not watercolor paper. And I'm putting on a combination of cadmium yellow with gesso. And I'm adding the gesso in there because I like adding the variety to the background. It's going to be a fairly simple background, but I do want some interest. And I find if I just put one color, it's very flat and uninteresting. So that's an easy tip to add interest to your background. Now, because I'm folding this one on top of another, and we're putting wet medium on here, I'm taking it off the foam core and drying it. And it handled that wetness fairly well. This is a bit of a test to see how the cardstock handles it, and it did a good job. Now, I purchased this Gnome stamp a little while ago, and I love it. He is so cute and adorable. It comes from NinnysNapkins, and there are a whole variety of different gnomes. So if you're a gnome lover, go and check it out. It was really hard to pick one. Now, if you know me at all, you know I'm not a stamper, but I'm trying. I'm using my archival ink because it's permanent when dry, and I'm putting a silicone mat underneath it to help me get a good stamp. This one's a little light in the middle, and I'm not too worried about that because typically when I paint it, I'm gonna outline it, but I do several of this at the same time, and I will store the extras in with the stamps in my little plastic pouches. And so they will be ready for another project. I figure once you have the stamp out and it's on the stamping block, you might as well build your stash. This stamp set has this cute little bee as well as some phrases that you will see later and that I can definitely use separate from the gnome. So now that this is all dry, I am going to do some work on the background, but first I'm going to do some cutting. I'm going to fussy cut around this gnome. Now you can choose to leave a little bit of a white border around it if you like that look. If you don't like that look, you'd be in the same camp as me. You're going to cut fairly close to it, but you don't need to watch me fussy cut. In the interest of adding a little more interest to the background, I'm just using a script stamp here. And now I'm going to stencil with this TCW Chickenwire reverse stencil. This also comes in 6-inch, and the 6-inch is perfect because the card is 6 inches. So any of the TCW stencils that are 6 inches fit perfectly on here. But I wanted something a little bigger scale just for the vision in my head. I'm using black acrylic paint. I'm putting it on the makeup sponge, stamping off on the glass mat, and then stenciling. I don't mind. In fact, I'm liking where I'm getting some that's a little bit darker black, a little more opaque, and a little bit lighter. Again, that builds interest. Loving the look of that. Now I know I'm going to put the gnome here. So now I'm deciding what else I'm going to add. And I decide I'm going to take off the painter's tape and glue the gnome a little bit on that white border. I think that's going to look good. And now I'm just cutting out the bees, and I'm just very generally cutting them out, and I will fussy cut them off camera. So I played around with those little bees, and then I printed off, "Don't worry, be happy." And I used a font that was fairly dark and heavy, and I put it on bold because I wanted it to really stand out. Now I'm doing bubble cutting around the sentiment. I want to get rid of some of that white. You could leave it with the white on it, cut as close as you can. Personal choice. I'm gluing this down with fluid matte medium, putting under and over. And you're going to want to make sure that all those layers are completely dry, because you don't want to have a little bit of that black paint reactivate or smudge for yourself. This bee gnome, you could cut off the beehive and the little bee antennas that he have and use it just as a regular gnome. So you have options even within a stamp. Don't think you have to use it exactly as the stamp is. So I'm taking this off. Now you have to be careful, go slowly, because you do run a risk of lifting up paper. And there, I've lifted up a little bit. That just might be user error. But in the end, you can't really tell. But go slow and you should be able to do a good job. So here you can see how I'm going to put the gnome a little off the yellow part. And I love how it frames the center of the card. Now the gnome I had stamped on just copy paper. I believe my copy paper is a little heavier than most. It's a 24-pound, and it handles wet medium fairly well. So I don't find I need to use cardstock or anything else, but you could. And I'm giving this a good coat of the matte medium on top because I know I'm going to colorize it, and I want to turn it into a non-porous surface that will take the color medium that I'm choosing to do. Making sure this is fully dry. And you can see that the paper, it handled it fairly well. It's a handmade card. Now I just want to add some interest to the inside, so I'm using this adorable little bee stamp. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to do some as well on the envelope. Making cards is not something that I typically do, so I was really enjoying it. And it's a quick, easy project, and it allows you to use your skills and have usable art that you can send out to someone. Here's one of the sentiments that they have: buzz, buzz, buzz. Putting that on the inside. So now I'm ready to color this. And what I'm going to use are the color sparks. These are watercolor pigmented powders. Now, they come in these little bottles, but what I've done is basically made a palette with them. I just put a little bit of the powder in, activate it with water, just plain water, and then I let it dry on these plastic pallets. And then all I have to do is take out the palette and I'm painting it on with a paintbrush. So I've used 3 different collections of the color sparks, and they're listed in the description box below. And I kind of mix and match to get colors. Now, these are watercolor powders, and as watercolor, they reactivate if you put any wet on top of them. So this is why I didn't colorize the background with the yellow, because I was gluing on top of it and that would have reactivated the yellow and would have changed it. So it's not that we can't use watercolor or water activated mediums. It's just we need to understand when the best time to use them is and what the limitations are. Now, I loved it in the black and white with the yellow background, and I thought about just painting the nose and the flowers and leaving everything else black and white. But, I was in it, so I just thought, I'm just going to enjoy this. Now, remember, when I glued down all the items, there is a coat of matte medium on top. You could also use clear gesso, and that turns that paper into a non-porous surface, and it takes the color better. So I'm drawing, I'm adding color, I'm mixing tones, shading with the watercolor. And since this isn't something that I've done a lot of, I'm learning as I go, because as soon as I touch it, it changes things. You could use a water brush here. I really liked how I could mix the colors. I could take the red with some of the yellow and make my own kind of corally color. So this palette, once I'm done with it, I'm just going to let the water evaporate and the color stays in the palette. Then I just have to reactivate it next time. This is from the Alpine set, this teal. Now here I'm mixing that alpine color with white gesso. And you can use these Color Spark pigment powders to colorize white gesso, clear gesso, gel medium. Here I get, there's that same tone. It's just more pastel. And then for the shoes, because I don't have a powder that's black, I'm using just regular acrylic paint. I love the vibrancy of the color sparks. So these I'm just going to let dry, set aside, let them dry, let the water evaporate, and then I will store them with the powder containers. Now I'm just going to grab my black Posca pen and I'm just outlining, kind of going a little bit scratchy. I'm not trying to make it perfectly straight because, of course, that's impossible. And then filling in some black on the bees, and then I'm going to do some line work on the gnome. If you like gnomes, please go to NinnysNapkins and check out my Oh Gnome You Didn't sentiment pack. Or if you want a mixed media digital class, there's the Gnome book. The link to Ninnies is in the description box below. Here I'm just outlining, just making it a little bit bolder. Trying to add white with the Posca pen, but watercolor will reactivate, and so it wasn't getting very opaque white. Just finishing off the envelope. If you're not already a subscriber to my YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, click on the bell, and pick to be notified of upcoming videos. You can also follow me on Instagram at Creative Katie. I hope you like this project. You can do it as a card, as an art journal page, or a mini canvas. Now go get creative.